Welcome back to Regency Rumors, and drumroll please, because we've officially hit 10,000 subscribers. Yay! Thank you so much to all my period drama besties and fellow history yappers for supporting the channel. To celebrate, I thought we'd do something a little bit fun, maybe a bit chaotic. We're talking about the period drama tropes we absolutely love and the ones that we can't stand anymore. So today we're diving into what's working and what's really not in modern period dramas. We'll chat about everything from the overuse of pop soundtracks to the slow burn romances that are not really hitting these days, to the way so many shows are trying and sometimes failing to modernize history. Please consider subscribing, leaving a comment. It helps the channel to grow and for me to know what period dramas people want to discuss and topics about history and historical fiction to cover. I've also decided to open up the community section of the channel where you can post about period dramas and have discussions, and it'll be an easier way for us to be able to chat right when stuff comes out. So for instance, I put out a video on the House of Guinness almost a month after it came out because it takes me so long to write a script and record and edit and get the video out there. And so the community tab is a great way for when shows come out and people are excited about them, we can get on there and chat. People can start discussions on shows that have just come out or historical fiction trends that people are really excited about. All I ask is that you be respectful of each other. Please refrain from posting anything negative about actors' appearances, their bodies. That will not be tolerated over here on the channel. Let's have fun, respectful chats about history and period dramas, okay? I'm really excited to talk to everybody over there and to be able to post about stuff that's coming out. So let's get going. Grab your tea, put on your Victorian house coat or your hoodie, I don't judge, and let's talk about the period drama tropes that are overdone, underrated, and absolutely irresistible. Just as a disclaimer, this video is going to be on the period dramas that have come out in the last year or so. I've had so many comments of people being like, what did you think of this series? Or what about this film that's coming out? And I've not been able to make individual videos about them. So I thought this would be a great vessel to talk about some of the period drama trends that we are really loving. Maybe some of the storytelling that period dramas in the past didn't get into that now it's feeling like they're a lot more diverse, or trends that we're hating. So if you're wondering why, didn't you include this period drama from 1980 or from the 70s or whatever, if we were to talk about period drama trends that we love and we hate from every generation, we would be here for 3 hours. So we're just concentrating it on the last year or so that we can cover modern period dramas and the stuff that they are doing right now that we love or we hate. First up, a period drama trend that I am fed up with. Period dramas being made for an American audience. Hear me out. I have an entire video on this that goes into great detail about how studios are intentionally changing stories and settings to be for American audiences, rather than a reflection of real culture or history outside of the US, which is diluting stories and at times dumbing them down. So Bridgerton is a huge example of this, but we are going to let Bridgerton off the hook because really not a period drama. I definitely did feel like this with House of Guinness though, where the story is more about making the Guinness family feel cool and edgy than a story about Irish history. I also feel like with American period dramas specifically, there is a need for America to be the main character. I'm not trying to be mean, but with the Buccaneers, the main character of that show is the fact that the girls are American, more than it is a show about their lives. I did enjoy the first season of the Buccaneers, and I'm trying to accept it for what it is because I know it's fun and frothy and it's not meant to be a serious period drama. And I get it, but this very blunt, we're fun, we're more free, we're more in touch with our emotions, and these stuffy British girls aren't because they aren't American. It's too overt. There is something a little too overt, in my opinion, about how recent American period dramas frame their storytelling. It's as if every show has to carry this heavy-handed message about American identity, as though being American has to be the story rather than just a part of the story. With the Buccaneers, the characters are constantly reminding us that they're American, they're bold, they're free-spirited, they're disruptive, but it ends up feeling like a marketing tagline with even the music and everything, rather than a natural part of who they are as people. So compare that with Little Women, which is one of the most quintessentially American stories ever written. Yet it never feels like it's trying to teach you about America or like how cool American girls are. Through Jo, Meg, Beth, and Amy, we get a sense of 19th century American life. Its gender expectations, its ambitions, and its domestic ideals. But the story is first and foremost about sisterhood and girlhood. You can learn a lot about America from it, but that's not its entire identity as a story. The same goes for Pride and Prejudice or Anne of Green Gables. We understand so much about British and Canadian culture through those stories: class, manners, the landscape, the limits placed on women. But no one ever watches Anne of Green Gables and says, ah, yes, what a story about being Canadian. It's a story about a girl discovering her voice and place in the world and her community. And that's the message that transcends borders. That's what I think American period dramas sometimes miss: the power of making something universal. We don't connect to characters because they represent a nation. We connect because they reflect something deeply human. Almost all period dramas set in the US in the last 5 years have had to do with American identity and westward expansion or politics. So I'm thinking shows like Manhunt, Ben Franklin, 1885, 1923, American Primeval, The Gilded Age. I do miss some of these stories about individuals that tell a story more about their life than moving through a political plot. Shows like The Buccaneers look gorgeous. I'm not really even mad about the modern language, the historically inaccurate costumes, or the frothiness of it all. It's just that I love a new story set in America that makes me feel like Little Women, like stories of individuals and families that make me feel connected to them because of their individual experiences and not how they fit into a bigger story of American history. So speaking of period dramas that are not made for an American audience, I'm going to move on to a period drama trend that I love, which is the rise of international period dramas on streaming platforms. I cannot tell you how much you are missing out on if you are not watching international period dramas outside of the US and the UK. I've watched historical dramas set in China, Japan, Italy, Spain, Brazil, and honestly, some of the best period dramas I've ever seen, and some of the most romantic, most yearning men on television have come from outside the English-speaking world. You can find so many of them on mainstream platforms like Netflix and Amazon nowadays. I'm actually planning to do a full video on my favorite obscure international period dramas and why they deserve more attention. All of those complaints about how there aren't enough slow burn romances or multi-season historical shows, they're already being made. They're just not always in English. It is so refreshing to see historical storytelling expand beyond the English manor house and into completely different cultures and aesthetics. Now I'm going to talk about some of the international period dramas that I love that have premiered on streaming platforms in the last year or so. So first up, there's The Leopard, which is set in Italy. It's a new adaptation of Giuseppe Tommasai di Lampedusa's classic novel, which explores the decline of Sicilian aristocracy through the eyes of Prince Don Fabrizio. It's rich, operatic, and full of melodrama and hidden burning desire. So think like Downton Abbey family, but with more revolution and sun and tragedy. It's on Netflix, and I think it's about 6 episodes. Then there's Perfect Match, which is a Chinese period drama set during the Northern Song dynasty, in which Madame Li relocates her entire family to the prosperous capital Beijing, opens a tea house, and sets out to find suitable matches for her 5 daughters. Along the way, they navigate class divisions and court intrigue and matters of the heart with wit and resilience. So think kind of like Pride and Prejudice vibes with the 5 daughters, but it's a lot more cheesy and with a cozy Chinese setting. It's just one of my really fun comfort watches, and there's like 1,000 episodes. Lastly is The Lady's Companion, which is set in 19th century Madrid, and it follows a chaperone who's been responsible for the successful matches of young women. And then she takes on the challenge of overseeing 3 spirited sisters, and she's thrust into a world of society balls and hidden scandals and finds herself being courted by one of the eligible young men who are supposed to be courting the young woman that she is chaperoning. It was absolutely scandalous. I stayed up till 3 a.m. binge watching this series. It is so fun and colorful, and it does have a bit of a Bridgerton aesthetic to it in that they play around with a lot of the colors and the fabrics, and it's not historically accurate. But I absolutely love the way they brought in Spanish architecture from the Edwardian period. And I know there's probably another name for that time period in Spain, but I think it is so cool to be able to see a period drama in a time where you think you know visually what it's supposed to be like, because we've only been exposed to these time periods in the UK or the US. And so when you watch a period drama, you're like, oh, that's the way it looked in Spain. That's the way some of the houses looked, and the architecture and the windows and the colors and the way the streets were and the architecture of the street lights in Spain. This one isn't historically accurate in a lot of the costumes and things, but the setting just opens up a whole new world for you to be like, wow, different places were different and exciting, and it doesn't always have to be in the UK for this time period to be really exciting. And so I feel like had I have looked at that and gone, oh, this is Spanish language, I'm just not going to try this out, then I never would have been opened up to this show that was so like romantic and heartwarming, and like that now I can't wait for a second season to come out. So there's truly never been a better time to try out foreign language period dramas. Most of them come with excellent subtitles, and many are even dubbed if that's your preference. But honestly, don't let the language barrier stop you. The storytelling, the romance, and the visual world building are so rich that you'll forget that you're reading subtitles in minutes of starting it. Trust me, you are missing out on some of the most passionate, beautifully made stories on screen right now. So go and look up some international period dramas if you never have before. All right, let's go to another trend that I hate. And several of you commented on the House of Guinness video about how you hate this too: modern music in period dramas. Look, I get it. There's something that makes you feel powerful and sexy, exciting, sensual, whatever, about using modern music in period dramas. It is effective. The reason why it's effective is because I think it's meant to make modern audiences understand certain feelings around historical events, character decisions, or like old technology by the people interacting in that space during that time. So music helps us feel like it's cool to watch electricity get turned on for the first time, or how it feels for working class communities to rise up against oppression, or how it might feel to get away with a heist on a train, something like that. Don't get me wrong, I love a good pop remix if it's clever, but not every period drama needs to sound like a Spotify playlist. It was done very cleverly and sparingly in Peaky Blinders, and it was a big hit in that show. But I feel like if you use it too much, or you don't use it in a way that is very tailored to the show that you're creating, it feels like they're just doing it to do it, like to make the show seem cool. I do feel like it was overdone with the new House of Guinness. I did like that they were featuring Irish artists, and perhaps it's a great way for some audiences to encounter Irish music or Irish language for the first time. So I think that can be important, but I do think it was overdone a little bit in this instance because of them trying to make the series cool, or maybe like I was saying, for a TikTok generation. So the video that I did about House of Guinness, I talked about how I think maybe Netflix is making history too sexy. So check that out if you want more context into my mixed feelings on the House of Guinness. The music can be really entertaining. I do just think it might not age well, and maybe like 20 years from now we'll be like, remember when we were like putting modern music in period dramas? Yeah, that really dated that show. So we'll see. Maybe not. Okay, let's go into a period drama trend that I love, which is the rise of cozy period dramas once again. I am so happy that there is a rise in cozy TV again, but without compromises in the writing, the acting, or the setting, which has felt like there are certain like adventure style shows and rom-coms in the last 10 years that have had flimsy plots and feel like fast fashion. So I'm happy about the fact that there are some modestly budgeted shows that are really well made and can be a bit of escapism whilst the world feels bleak and scary at the minute. Not every historical series has to be about trauma or revolution or political scandals. Sometimes we want a bit of comfort and community. Shows like All Creatures Great and Small and Call the Midwife have healthy long-term audiences, and I am one of them, and I love being able to see these cozy and heartwarming shows on TV. I think when Downton Abbey died down, there was this feeling that all of these historical shows had to be huge and become franchises. And now that we're on the other end of that and these shows are just focused on what they are actually doing and not trying to be something that they're not, they feel so much richer because of it. There's some wonderfully warm period dramas coming out, like the Forsytes, the Hardacres, and Miss Scarlet and Miss Scarlet now, that take themselves seriously, but also they know what they are and they do such a good job with limited budgets. I think we're going to start seeing a rise in more comfort TV with A New Little House on the Prairie and a Murder, She Wrote reboot. Now, do I feel like we need new reboots yet again? No, but I feel like if shows like Little House on the Prairie or a reboot of Murder, She Wrote goes down well, it means that they'll start producing more of these shows, and that so we'll have little warm blankets to watch more and more of. Okay, so we got to talk about my next hate, and this one is a bit heavy and controversial, but I think it's important to talk about, and that is essay storylines and period dramas. There's been a real overuse of assault storylines in recent period dramas, and too often it feels like a lazy shorthand for gritty realism to me. Of course, these stories can absolutely be told meaningfully, but when some of these shows lean heavily into these storylines repeatedly, it starts to feel exploitative rather than purposeful. So Outlander and the Yellowstone franchises feels like they kind of fall into that trap. And YouTube is very specific about talking about these things, so I'm not using the actual wording, but I hope that you can cotton on to what I am talking about. So these scenes feel designed more for shock value than for advancing story or exploring character, in my opinion. It's frustrating because there are so many other ways to explore power, gender, and vulnerability in historical settings without leaning so heavily on sexualized trauma. I'll be honest, I couldn't make it past about 3 seasons of Outlander because it just felt like essay scenes were being used as a crutch and that they were very upsetting to watch. I know that might upset some people because there are some really big fans of Outlander. I don't think we need to sit through repeated scenes of assault for the sake of like gritty realism, or for it to be like, well, this is a part of how hard it was for them to be in this adventurous story in this wild landscape. Historically, essay was rampant, especially in periods like the one depicted in Blood of My Blood or 1921, and it's absolutely important to acknowledge that. But including it in storylines over and over again starts to feel like it's more about shock than meaningful storytelling. I actually avoided Blood of My Blood altogether because I just knew that there would be some sort of like essay storyline, and there probably was. That said, I do think it's important to shine a light on essay, particularly in historical contexts where the vulnerable, the young, and minorities were routinely victimized. There's absolutely a time and place for these stories, but how they're executed matters so much. Making actors perform these scenes repeatedly or graphically risks tipping into exploitation, I think. We should remember the lessons from shows like Game of Thrones and the toll it took on actors like Emilia Clarke. You don't need to act out essay to make a show feel edgy or impactful. You can hint at it, you can reference it, show the consequences without forcing the audience and the actors to endure it repeatedly over and over again. There are so many effective ways to show the impact of essay and other historical injustices without putting people through re-traumatizing scenes. And I wish more period dramas that are like action-packed like 1921 and Outlander would explore different ways of telling these stories. Okay, let's move on to a trend that I love, which is new female biopics that don't center love. So finally, we're starting to get female biopics that actually center the women themselves. I feel like so many female historical biopics have centered around their love lives rather than, say, their talent. So for instance, like Miss Potter about Beatrix Potter and Becoming Jane about Jane Austen. The main plot lines in those films, rather than them as talented women, was their love stories, which is why I was so disappointed in Emily, the Emily Bronte biopic that I think came out last year, because there was no need in her having a love story that didn't actually happen, even though the film was really good. And I'm going to be making an entire video on that film specifically, so I won't go more into it. But I just wanted to say here that by contrast, Miss Austen takes such a different approach in telling Jane Austen's story. And honestly, that was really refreshing to me. So the story centered on Jane Austen's sister, Cassandra, as she deals with Jane's death and faces the heartbreaking decision of what to do with her personal letters, letters that could completely change how history remembers her. Instead of trying to turn Jane's life into a romantic drama or like a tragic spinster story, the film focuses on what made her really remarkable: her wit, her sharp observations about society, her bond with her sister, and the quiet strength that she carried through her life. The series doesn't chase romantic scandal or lean into, the usual like misunderstood genius trope. It's a gentle story. It's heartfelt, and it actually tries to follow her life in a way that feels a bit more truthful. Now, does this show romanticize Jane Austen? Yes. So many period dramas are always going to romanticize history, right? Like Miss Austen had its cheesy moments, but I'd take this kind of like sincere, emotionally grounded storytelling any day over the glossy, Hollywood-fied love stories we often get when it comes to real historical women. It's more about honoring who Jane Austen was, not just dramatizing her for the sake of a plot. Another female biopic I'm really intrigued by is The Testament of Anne Lee, and it's not come out yet, so I don't have like opinions on it or anything, but I will be making a full video on that when it comes out. So it's about Anne Lee, the 18th century founder of the Shakers. It was a religious sect known for their strict celibacy and communal living and dance-like worship. She is such a fascinating figure to me because she led this like radical movement in a time when women weren't supposed to have any kind of public authority, let alone spiritual power. Is it giving cult energy? Yes. But I'm fascinated about a woman in the 1800s who didn't even have the right to vote and was being controlled by a husband to be able to start a religious cult. So Anne Lee's followers literally used movement and song and rhythm as forms of devotion to God. So turning that into a film that blends history and theology and music feels like it could be something really different. And I definitely can see why it's supposed to be included in this year's awards ceremonies. I think it is going to be a bit weird. It is about a celibacy cult after all, but that's what excites me. I'm curious to see how they portray her, not as like a caricature of just a crazy cult leader, but as a complicated woman who genuinely believed that she was leading people to spiritual freedom. To me, it's such a rare thing to see a historical film about a woman whose story isn't centered on romance or scandal, but on faith and community and control. Okay, onto a period drama trend that I think we all hate, which is so many remakes. This might sound like a no-brainer, but I'm so over remakes. There's always a part of me that gets a little excited when a new adaptation is announced. I want to see how they're going to do it, what their take will be, but I can't lie. I am just tired. Like, I am tired of these remakes. Every time I see news about another remake, it feels like less of something to look forward to and more like homework of like, well, I'm a massive Bronte fan, so it feels like an obligation to remind myself to go to the theater when that comes out and try to give it a fair shot. 2 different Count of Monte Cristos came out in the last year, I think. There's yet another Dracula. It feels like they're just making these hoping that there will be a built-in fan base, which will find them and watch them, but they're putting almost nothing into the marketing budget of some of these, so people don't even know that they're coming out. The only ones that are getting big, recognition are the new versions of Wuthering Heights and Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility, which are like the stereotypical top classics. For the most part, it feels like studios are remaking everything except for the ones that we actually want. Or when they do make something that we've asked for, they completely miss the tone. Persuasion got turned into a quirky comedy when it's meant to be a deeply emotional drama. And now we're getting a Wuthering Heights that's been sexed up apparently and modernized. For what purpose, I'm not exactly sure. I am hoping that Emerald Fennell has a more elaborate plan that we don't know about yet. Meanwhile, we're still waiting for adaptations of Northanger Abbey, which would be perfect for the spooky, sensual, gothic vibes that are all over Book Talk right now, or The Tenant of Wallfall Hall, which would resonate massively today with its themes of DV and women escaping abuse, or even a new North and South, I feel like, a story about industrialization and wealth disparity that would hit so hard right now with the way that the world is. It's not that I hate remakes. I just think we've reached remake fatigue. Either market them in a way that makes me believe they actually honor the source material or give me something genuinely new. There's such a clear difference between adaptations that are made by people who love the original story and ones made by people who are trying to prove their own creativity or ego. The former always lands better. It's the difference between fans of, The Summer I Turned Pretty or The Love Hypothesis feeling seen and cared for as massive fans for these novels versus adaptations that alienate their audience by changing everything that made people love it in the first place. I'd rather see studios take creative risks, explore new periods, new countries, new perspectives. If we're going to keep revisiting the past, then let's at least expand it, right? Okay, finally, a period drama trend that I love, that I'm trying to accept more, and that is 80s and 90s core as a new era of period dramas. Am I struggling with the idea of the 80s and 90s being classified as an era for period dramas? Yes. There is a part of me that feels like period dramas should only be classified as eras in which no one is still alive today. However, I feel like with how much of a boom the internet was and how much of our lives that computers and phones have changed since the 80s and 90s, it feels like a completely different era, and it feels closer visually and culturally to like the 1950s and 60s settings, without everyone holding glowing rectangles in their hands all the time, than it does to it feeling like it was close to today. You know what I mean? Like, I started watching this adorable period drama that is set in the 90s. It's a cozy murder mystery called Murder at Evensong. There was something so nostalgic, like so vintage about it, even though it was in my lifetime. There is something so comforting about watching a period drama set in a time that feels recent, familiar enough to recognize, but still far enough away to feel nostalgic. No smartphones, no social media. And honestly, the late 80s and 90s it looks good on camera. The hair isn't too polished. The makeup looks like something real people would actually wear. And the clothes have a balance of structure and comfort. That's something that I've always loved about the Golden Girls. They always look stylish, but they're also comfortable. And I don't know what this trend is nowadays, that if you're trying to be stylish or fashionable, that it also needs to look like it hurts or be really tight on you. But I love that everything was kind of a bit more free-flowing and also stylish at the same time. And I would love to get back to things being like that. And you can really see that in new shows like Rivals. It's soaked in that like glamorous but tacky 80s aesthetic. There's the bold colors and the big hair and the country estates with questionable decor choices. It's all over the top, but that's exactly the point. The 80s were dramatic and unapologetic, and Rivals leans into that energy, which I really love. Maybe that's why this revival of 80s and 90s nostalgia works so well right now. We're craving stories from the last eras that felt a bit slower or more tactile or more human, and we always look to the past and romanticize it a bit, don't we? But that's probably why that these 80s and 90s dramas are becoming so popular right now, and that there's this rise in 90s core again, I guess. So while I am grumpy about period dramas set in the 80s and 90s being called period dramas, I am really excited that they are being made. And if you haven't watched a few of them, then you should definitely go and check them out. Okay, onto a period drama trend that I hate, which is not enough slow burn, yearning romances. What I hate about modern period drama romances is that everything is too overt, in my opinion. Like, don't get me wrong, Bridgerton is beautiful, it's fun, it's romantic, it's got the costumes, the drama, and it's got like the yearning music and glances. But sometimes the storytelling feels a bit too loud. There's no mystery anymore, like no real will they, won't they tension. Like you can tell from the first episode exactly who likes who because they kind of say it a bit too much in the overt storytelling and they act like it too. That's why I really struggled with the new Persuasion. Besides the fact that it was made into this weird, clunky comedy, what really ruined it for me was how Anne and Captain Wentworth just talked through everything. They therapized their relationship like it was a modern breakup over a cup of coffee. And to me, that kills the whole point of historical romance. The beauty of those stories is that people couldn't say how they felt. There were rules, social, emotional, internal rules that kept them apart. Half the time, they didn't even understand their own feelings. And that made the tension so much better. Like, hashtag bring back tension. For the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, it was such a masterclass in restraint, I felt like. And it was the adaptation that people say is like the least like Austen's actual work. Like they say it's too overt. And that one felt like there's more restraint than in a lot of the period dramas that we're seeing nowadays. Elizabeth and Darcy barely say what they mean, but you feel everything, like every glance and every half smile and every awkward silence. It's all charged. You're constantly wondering, what does that mean? Was that a compliment or an insult? And that's kept us hooked years and years later. It is that subtext, the longing that simmers beneath the surface that we have to guess as an audience till the very end to know what's going to happen with these characters. And yes, obviously there are signs that people in romances are going to get together, but it just feels like everything is so overt right now that you don't have the pleasure of trying to figure out these little clues for yourself. So if you compare that to today's shows like Bridgerton or the Buccaneers, where the dialogue just tells you everything outright, it's not that I dislike them. They are fun and they're unapologetically romantic, but I really miss the quiet, unsaid tension from the 90s and the 2000s. And honestly, I am tired with period drama romances being equated with casual hookups and endless like love triangles, or sorry, Colin Bridgerton, but like random sex with multiple people when you're actually in love with someone else. Like, I just want some good old-fashioned yearning. Like, give me far from the madding crowd yearning. The kind where a single look across a room is more tingly and like sexier than any love scene. Like, ugh. Is that too much to ask? Like, is that really, is it too much to ask? Well, that is it for me, guys. What period drama tropes do you hate? What trends do you love? What do you wish that there was more of? Thank you so much for getting us to 10K. I can hardly believe it. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting. It helps me to know what period dramas that you're interested in us chatting about over here. Love you, period drama besties, and until the next video, bye!